This one that I'm standing on is a nice example. In this case, you can see it has pretty good color right now. We're right in the beginning of February. It had this same color in January and December. It's pretty difficult to do, and in this case, what was done was a really heavy application of Nourish Biosol. So some really good organic fertilizer. Ours is Nourish Biosol. There's others on the market. When the weather's still warm enough to activate it, and if you wait too long, the soil starts to go dormant, and especially organic fertilizers don't work real well as the weather cools off. Really late October or very, very early November, something like 20 pounds per thousand of Nourish Biosol will green this up, and then almost always it'll hold that green right through November, December, and January. So if you miss that timing, or you do it at the wrong rate, or you just forget, and so you're stuck with a lawn that you wanted to be green through the winter and it's not green. One way that's cheating, but I'll clue you in on it, that can make it green and that can also guarantee you'll always be green in the winter is the one time of the year where I could say you could use a synthetic fertilizer if you don't abuse it. During this cold winter time, there are a couple of synthetic fertilizers, one called Simplot Nitroking, very high in 2 different forms of nitrogen that releases in cold weather. That's a way to address it, and once per year. It's not like a soil sterilant, and then you go right back as the weather warms up, February, maybe early March, mid-March, to organic products. That'll keep the lawn very green, and that'll keep the soil very healthy and fortify it for these high temperatures that we're about to get in when cool season grass struggles again, and that's when we need all the help we can get. I like to call the style of gardening we do with our John and Bob's products as soil-based, and that's as opposed to chemical-based.
Hi, my name is Oscar. I'm the gardener on this property. On this small area, every year do the same thing. We replace with sod every October, and May or June do the same thing. Some areas, they stay nice and green in summertime, but at this area, for some reason, we don't know what's the problem. We use some synthetic fungicides. They work okay for a few months, but after that, the problem comes back.
It's either water-related or soil-related. We did look at the irrigation system right away and looked at ways we could really maximize the efficiency of the irrigation system and have even amounts of water being applied everywhere. And there was a tiny bit of improvement when we did that. That's the first thing we looked at and the first thing we improved. And then we immediately started applying blend in pretty heavy applications just topically. A little bit of improvement to where come summertime it looked a little better and it lasted a little longer. Traditional approach with products like Scott's Turf Builder and Miracle Grow, where you try to maximize the health of the plant. That sometimes works, but in this case it wasn't working. But those products, that's really what they focus on, is feeding the plant directly. Scott's Turf Builder has several different formulas where they'll include insecticides and they'll include herbicides, so prevent weeds, prevent insects or kill insects, feed the plant. All of these are kind of what I call an old style of gardening, where we're really ignoring the soil. We're just focused on the plant, and we're trying to give that plant everything it could use, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but to feed it directly and to ignore the fact that we've got soil there that could be part of the problem. We're ignoring that. So when I got involved, we didn't use any of those products. They aren't the solution because they don't build soil at all, and that's what we need to do, either build soil and or at the same time make sure the right amount of moisture is being applied. I'm going to use what I think is a brilliant tool in the landscape industry. We call it a sharpshooter, and instead of tilling it, this sharpshooter works great so that we're going to try to break through that heavy compacted crust. So I went around and did that throughout, and that way I know that right off the start I'm going to have some area for the exchange of air and water, and also some loosened area that the roots can penetrate into. As I mentioned, we just, on one side of the walk, we just put in 2,600 square feet of new sod. And the question always comes up, what is better, to seed it or to sod it? And sod it, obviously you get the advantages of an instant lawn that instantly goes into reducing pressures from weeds because you got this dense root mat of roots. Really the disadvantage to sod is the cost, and it's dramatic. And so if you can do it in the right time of the year, seed is so much less expensive, and you should be able to grow a lawn very quickly that looks like a sod lawn if you can do it in the early spring or the fall, because those have the temperatures necessary to get that lawn to germinate quickly. With the seed I'm using, probably in 7 to 12 days I'll get germination. So whether you plant your new lawn in clay soil with seed or with sod, watering is a really critical part of it. If it's seed, you don't want to water it a lot, but that seed has to be kept moist when the sun's out. So it's completely different watering than long-term watering. What you want to do is, say about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, have the first, either you water it manually or your sprinklers come on. And you don't want to water deeply, which eventually you want to water your lawn deeply. But right now you want to water very shallow because you just want to keep the seed moist. And you want to water, if you have high temperatures, say 80 to 100 degrees somewhere in there, you want to water probably 3 or 4 times a day, keeping that seed moist. And a similar philosophy for sod, because the sod, all its roots have just been cut off, it's stressed, it needs the top part to stay moist. So you would also water it 2 or 3 times a day when the sun's out, and that's completely opposite how you would water once it roots. All these steps are important, but the most important one is you have to keep the seed moist when the sun's out, when it's warm. So this expanse right next to me of sod is 5,500 square feet. Then there's another piece in the other part of the yard that's about 1,000 feet. So the process of laying the sod is really just hard work, where you butt up the joints as closely as you can and stagger them so that you don't have big lines of joints, because as you look at this, you'll see where it fails most often, or you get a little bit of drying and browning, is at the joints. So you can see right now is one of the watering cycles. Right now this is watering 4 times a day, in this case with MP rotators on 23 minutes. And let that lawn root, and then you slowly dry it out, and you get to a point where you get it nice and firm for that first mowing about 2 weeks from the date you installed it. And then we resume watering, but not the same as before, where we were at 4 times a day. We'll probably go to once a day after the first mowing. So Oscar is an expert on mowing the lawn perfectly to compensate for harsh climate conditions, which we have here. The harshest is the middle of the summer. And so in the middle of the summer, he was telling me he raises the height, which is the perfect thing to do, because you want to, pretty much what it does is shade the roots, cool the lawn, and protect from heat. And he's telling me he goes as much as 4 inches high and does that as long as we have high temperatures. Then when we start to have lower temperatures like this, and we have more moisture, then you lower it down to about 2 inches. And yes, that's also good, because then moisture is a problem, and this cold, dark, dank environment promotes rust. So we want to open it up a little. We're no longer trying to shade the roots. Now we're trying to let the roots get sun.
Yes.
And so now you go 2 inches. And you also mow very regularly, right?
Yeah, once a week or twice a week, depend the weather.
And I noticed you alternate directions.
Yes.
So that you don't end up with ruts in the lawn. And that's an excellent idea, to alternate directions. Different landscape professionals will have different opinions on this topic, but my opinion is to mow the lawn after we seed it, get it to germinate some, and then just as soon as you can, start mowing the lawn. Mowing the lawn allows it to start toughening up, spreading, and becoming a lot stronger. And I wouldn't, and also if you don't mow it right away and it gets really, really long, which it might because we fertilized it fairly heavily right at the time of seeding, then it's a mess in that first mowing, you know, because it's moist, it's still cool in time of the season, and so you end up with this gunky mess of lawn that wants to lay down and doesn't allow you to mow it. So I like to mow even earlier than it looks like you should. As soon as we get a good amount of germination where you see more green than brown and there's something to mow, I start mowing. All the products that I've mentioned here, the links are in the description below. And we got a lot of fantastic answers. And the winner of the free bag of blend is